on. I just, Hi, this is Kirby Sommers for the Epstein Project podcast. And my guest today is Laura Goldman. I appreciate the fact that Laura has decided to join me and speak to me about Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. Laura happens to be a friend, a long-term friend of Isabel Maxwell and a friend of the Maxwell family. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing good for 11 in the morning on a Saturday, Sunday.
I know. Thank you for joining me on such short notice. You were like, okay, let me jump into the shower. Let me finish my breakfast, my coffee. And I was like, okay, let me scramble over. I'm also in my pajamas. Let me just scramble over and send you a link. And here we are. So thank you. So I just want to remind the audience that Ghislaine Maxwell is accused of grooming underage girls for Epstein to abused, and that this went on for a number of years. And as far as like from where I sit, and I'm going to ask you, I was just stunned, as are a lot of the people that follow this case, at how condensed the case became. Like the prosecution was scheduled to go on for a little bit over 4 weeks. The defense was scheduled to go on for about 2 weeks. How do you feel about the condensation of what should have lasted through January 6th, but is going to probably come to an end this week?
I wasn't surprised at all. I said from the beginning, and it's in all kinds of newspapers, the Sun, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, that she was not going to turn anybody in. She wasn't going to discuss Prince Andrew, Leslie Wexner, etc. So in light of that, who was going to testify for her? I knew that Ghislaine has incredible bad taste in men. I knew that Scott Borgerson wasn't going to come to trial, and Ted Wade had made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with the case. So, who was going to testify for her? She kind of kept her family at bay, although Isabel had some, knowledge, was in touch with her. So, and, she kept her family at bay to protect them, she says. I think she was embarrassed and didn't want them to know. So the bottom line is who was going to testify for her? Now, I was surprised. I know Dr. Dietz. I actually spent 6 weeks with him. And I was surprised he didn't testify. So I am very curious what happened there.
Well, let's explain to the audience who Dr. Dietz is. So I'll let you do that.
Oh, okay. Dr. Dietz is a very well-known forensic psychiatrist, and he basically is a gun for hire. He mostly testifies for the defense, for the prosecution. In my case, he was involved because my billionaire hired him. So, but he was widely discredited during the case of Suzanne Smith, the mother that drove into the river and killed her babies in South Carolina. So maybe they decided not to call him because of that. But he was supposed to testify that grooming by proxy isn't a thing. And, he's testified in the Ted Bundy case, all kinds of very high profile cases. He used to be a consultant on Law and Order, etc. So I was very surprised that he didn't testify. I also thought that maybe Isabel would testify a little bit, but it seemed like she wanted nothing to do with testifying. But she may not have had, she couldn't refute anything, so maybe that's why she didn't testify.
Right. So it's my understanding that while he was initially put on the list, right, those 35 possible people that were supposed to testify for the defense side, that Dr. Dietz, they decided at the last minute that although he was supposed to say exactly what you just said, that there's no such thing as grooming by proxy, that in fact, it could have carried the implication that, for the jury, that even desirable behavior, such as being nice to a victim, could be connected to nefarious and or criminal conduct. So that's why they decided, we're going to nix him, right? But the one person that I was curious about, because I think I saw this on your timeline, and maybe it wasn't yours, but it's my understanding that Scott Borgerson is one of the people they wanted to have on the stand because he is her husband, and that he wanted immunity, sort of like to testify anonymously. Is that true?
No, that was, yes, he did agree to testify anonymously. Now, I don't understand why he needed anonymity because everybody knows he's her husband.
Yeah.
I guess, and I think that was kind of, I don't want to say a dickish move, because people know who he is. He's already associated with the case. I think what he would have done, and it's a shame he didn't do it, he would have said that she didn't run away, that, I'm not saying she didn't, I'm
Right.
saying he would have said that. And I think that she had moved on, and that he felt, and he would have humanized her in that he felt safe with his kids being around her. And I think that would have helped tremendously. And that he didn't do it says what a total jerk he is.
Yeah, she doesn't have good
choose to
taste.
marry someone, it's for better, for worse. I understand people get divorced. I'm not but
yeah.
he benefited a lot from his relationship with her. And I don't think the damage to him was already done. And her life is on the line. You may disagree that she deserves any redemption, but
you know what? Yeah, let's just pause here and let's tell the listening audience that they know that I am on the side of the victims, and you are on the side of the Ghislaine Maxwell family. However,
no,
but
I'm
you've
on
also
the side of defendants.
Yeah.
I as someone who went through the criminal justice system myself, there are certain rights that I felt Ghislaine deserved, and even the most heinous defendant, which she may be, deserves. No, everyone thinks it's about her or Isabel. No, it is about that people are entitled to certain rights as a defendant. It's in our Constitution, but they've been trampled over. And there actually was a great article, and I've been saying it a long time myself, but it was in Teen Vogue, so now it's official. Law and Order has made defendants, look like crap, and the police look like heroes. And that can be, but it's not always. So also, every woman that I met during my time in the criminal justice system was there because of a man. And a Boston University professor last week wrote an article in the Washington Post where she talked about the victim defendant. And that's what I never coined that phrase, but this professor at BU did, Julia Dahlstrom, and that's what Ghislaine is. This does not mean that she should go get away scot-free. It doesn't mean that she is. It looks like she's guilty. Okay, but there were reasons for what she did.
So to go with your conversation right now, I think it was you who wrote this on your Twitter. I said Ghislaine Maxwell was in love with Jeffrey Epstein to try to explain her inexplicable actions.
Right.
She didn't like that. As the New York Times reports, her entire defense is predicated on Ghislaine hardly knowing Jeffrey Epstein and being his employee. And then you close that with, huh? So you want to just explain that to everyone? Because I thought that was her defense too. And it seems like it's not really it.
Well, I surprised once she was arrested and they came down on me, and I stayed quiet and really didn't defend myself. But the case is basically over now.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine that she was actually going to go to trial and put her family through it in a way. But I knew she was, because she wasn't going to turn anyone in, so she had nothing to barter for a plea bargain. So part of me hoped she would spare everyone the difficulty of a trial, but I knew she didn't have anything to barter that she was willing to barter. So I knew she would probably go to trial, but I couldn't imagine on any level that she would pretend not to really know Jeffrey Epstein. That just seemed like ridiculous. I remember, first of all, you saw all the recent pictures of them together and whatever, but and she would arrange his birthday parties. She would run and get him chicken soup. So how does this person not know him? And then people say, well, they weren't really boyfriend and girlfriend anymore. She was in love with him. She wanted to marry him. Isabel told me the same thing. So that she then decided, oh, I hardly know him. Now, that may have been her only viable path for to win. Okay. And that's her path. But I'm not exactly sure that it's accurate. Maybe in her mind it is, but
Got it. Okay. So let's go to something that everybody's questioning, why she didn't name names. She didn't necessarily have to name Prince Andrew. She didn't necessarily have to name Bill Clinton or Leslie Wexner, but she could have named a lot of people under that level, and she just didn't do that. That surprises me.
No. She really thinks she's going to go back to society. So
wow.
And in those rules, you can't be a rat. The mafia has their rules.
I was just going to say that sounds exactly like that. It's like,
right.
It's like,
but high society has bigger rules. You just don't, shit the bed, as they say. So I think that she probably, after what happened to Jeffrey, she is a little afraid to say something. But, there were a lot of names that she could have named or explained or whatever. And it is a little surprising to me. And, I even thought she might call Alan Dershowitz. I mean, I know he's controversial and whatever, but that's a guy who wants to talk.
Right, that's true.
And she didn't. Maybe he refused to be involved. Although in the beginning he was also defending her. But I don't understand what the point of going to trial was, because if you read carefully what happened yesterday in court, which was Saturday, which is a rare Saturday hearing, the judge ruled that even if she was willfully ignorant of what was happening, she could still be found guilty. So if she avoided knowing, but could have reasonably suspected, I guess would be the standard, she could still be found guilty. If the jury applies that, they may not know how to apply that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see how she can't be found guilty, because it's pretty clear that that things were happening. And then I don't know if you saw yesterday, the Sun came out with this article where 3 girls she took to a club, and she was standing to the side. I mean, when I was surprised when she knew Jeff Bezos, that she was at the Vanity Fair party, etc. And I think possibly she was running, I don't want to say a prostitution ring, because that's not really what it was. It was, she would find pretty girls for rich men, and that's how she got invited everywhere.
Well, she was always labeled the fixer, by almost everyone in high society. Oh, she's just a fixer, blah, blah, blah. It's just
Well, no,
Ghislaine.
if you read Vicky Ward, she says they thought she was a dilettante. I never thought she was a dilettante. Maxwells aren't dilettantes. I mean, they may not do what you think is normal, but they
Right.
do something. But the amount of girls and going through was just tremendous.
I mean,
And so, she would maybe offer Jeff Bezos, at your party, I'll bring pretty girls or whatever. I mean, it just, I don't know. I don't want to impugn Jeff Bezos, but it seems she was invited everywhere. She's not the brightest. She is funny and whatever. Like a lot. One of my friends said to me, I've written 7 books and I wasn't invited to Bezos' Arthur party. Why was she?
right. Except that there's a difference between inviting pretty girls, right, and inviting girls that are not of age. So there's
Well,
there's
I think for most everybody else, they were 18. Okay, now you can say 18 for a 50-year-old is wrong, and I would agree with you, but it's not illegal. One of the things I tried to say during this whole case is the problem is these crazy laws. I mean, why in London can you only be 16 to be over the age of consent? Why in New Mexico can you only be 16? I mean,
I think in London it's 17. I think in New Mexico it's 16.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Too young.
You're still too young.
Young.
I agree, but especially 14 is too young. And let's not forget Jean-Luc Brunel's gift of the 12-year-old triplets to Epstein. I mean, it was a very bizarre world where strange things happened, and she could have left, but she didn't. She didn't.
See, and that's one of the things I kept trying to argue, and everybody got mad at me. She was hopelessly in love with him and couldn't leave. And I know you don't like to hear that.
I don't believe it. I find that to be disingenuous, because they got together. She was already 30. And he already had the desire of going out with very young women. And people who knew them at that time, I've spoken to a few of those people. And, that I wrote a book about her life, her early years. And so I had to do some digging there. And so by the time she met him, he had his preference. And he liked blonde, young, and thin. And Ghislaine is voluptuous, brunette, although very pretty, right, when she was younger. And, I don't know what she looks like now, but she's not the thin person looking to lose all her hair like she would pretended to be. She seems to be in okay condition, but that by the time they got together, he had a preference and she too had a preference. And I just found that Ghislaine Maxwell, with her upbringing, because Robert Maxwell did bring her up as if she were royalty, a Kennedy, right? That's how I kind of look at the way Robert Maxwell raised his children, with knowledge of world politics. And here we have Jeffrey Epstein with his Brooklyn accent, which he never lost, right? Once drove a taxi, comes into this money through various means, which we won't get into today. And for them to, I just could not see, especially the victims said we never really saw them hold hands. They didn't sleep in the same room. Some of the victims, one of them in the trial did say something to the effect that they slept together. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's, for me, it's a stretch.
Okay, but you're looking at marriage as an American bourgeoisie kind of thing. She's looking as marriage as the uniting of 2 European dynasties. He had the money, she had the cachet. Okay, I understand what you're looking at, but that's not how she viewed marriage. That's not how any of them viewed marriage.
So you're saying that she looked at marriage as
partnership, as
right.
A business,
and that's exactly what she had with him, marriage or not. She had a business partnership.
Right. That's number one. Number two, she was obviously, look, when she was with Ted and Scott, she did not achieve the same levels of social elite. Not, and there was something about the two of them, the chemistry, that allowed them to become who they were. Maybe it's because he had that incredible house in, houses, the island, the big house in New York. But she, that's what she wanted. That's what she was trained for. Now, a lot of people could say, why would she, so I'm just saying. But, one thing just to go back to, nobody, Eva Duben has come out of this clean. And that does not make any sense to me.
Well, I want to talk to you about Eva Duben.
Yeah.
So let me just say that
Okay.
not only was I surprised about Eva Duben, but we can talk about Eva for sure. But I was surprised that at what Alessi said, Juan Alessi, who was Epstein's housekeeper for many years. I saw nothing, I heard nothing, therefore I say nothing. I was surprised with Larry Vysotsky and David Rogers also basically saying the same thing. I didn't see anything. And we've heard from the victims claiming, there was abuse technically in all the homes, the cars, the planes. Epstein had the plane padded on the floor, padded carpeting, because there would be, activity on it, right? And then for them to all say, no, we didn't see anything. But then Eva Duben, who I have heard from various sources, was a participant, and one of the victims, Jane, the very first one to testify, said that she participated in a group event that we're not going to mention, right? But and for Eva to get on the stand and to be allowed to say, I can't remember. What was your take on that? I mean, I thought, my God, how is she allowed to just
say this? Is the thing. If you saw my Twitter feed earlier, I said, why weren't the pilots charged? Transporting underage girls is what they did. Okay. And ignorance of age is not a defense.
Correct.
So
well, stop there. Answer your own question, because that's good. That's a very good one. Okay. Why do you think they were not charged?
I think for some reason they thought that. I would have, if I was going to do it, I would have started with them, found them to, somewhat, guilty, and had a plea bargain where they turned in the next person. There are many, one of my objections is that the woman Ghislaine was the only person paying for this. I am not saying she's not guilty, but why weren't the pilots? I mean, you can like Juan Alessi, but it's hard for me to believe he never saw anything.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I'm not looking for him to be punished. He seemed to have been punished enough. Okay. What about all these assistants? They saw nothing. Come on. And I know you had some troubles with Maria Farmer or whatever. She worked in that house. She saw nothing. I'm not, maybe she was naive, whatever. So I would have built usually cases from the mafia are built from the bottom up.
Correct.
And if they had done that, what they would have done is Ghislaine would have had to not been able to go to trial, and maybe she would have turned on someone then. So I think that's why they didn't do it that way.
Why do you think it took so long? Well, I think you're correct in the normal approach is you go for the smaller fish first, and they did not do this. And then you go for someone a little higher, and then you have more, you build a stronger case. This said, I mean, so they go after Epstein, who conveniently disappears a year and a half ago, right? But why did it take a whole year between the time Epstein died of whatever the cause, or whatever happened to him, it takes then they don't arrest Ghislaine until July 2nd. I mean,
Okay, now
what happened?
everyone criticized me, including you, but I gave them the clues to find her. I
Oh, well, I
saying,
knew where she
Isabel-
was, frankly.
Okay.
I always knew where she was.
Okay, but I kept saying Isabel, 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 because, and that's how they eventually found her. And I told the police, I mean, the FBI police, whatever the task force was, that that's how you find her, because they're in regular contact. So they eventually admitted in court that they found her by tapping Isabel's phone. Now, I also in November of 2019 told
No,
them
I
that
think,
they,
but I want you to keep talking, but I don't want to skip over an important. Why didn't they arrest Ghislaine at the same time they arrested Epstein, for example? And then just I'm going to not interfere, but I just want to know why.
no, I'll tell you why. That I
Okay.
do know. That I know
Okay.
for sure.
Okay.
Okay, if that's what you're asking. They thought that if they arrested just Jeffrey, it was more likely that a very rich defendant like him, which they were more afraid of to go to trial, would make a plea bargain if he was protecting people like Ghislaine. And that if he didn't make a plea bargain, they would then arrest Ghislaine. So that's why they didn't arrest them together.
And then they waited a whole year. I mean, I don't think they were looking for her for a year, frankly.
No, they weren't looking for her for a year, but I actually think that they got too much. There was too much pressure not to arrest her. They weren't ready. The case. Look, you saw the case they put on, even a year and a half after that. So really, 2.5 years. It was whatever you want to say. I am not saying that the victims weren't. The stories were heartbreaking. Okay, 14 years old. Asked to come over. They admired Ghislaine. I mean, it was heartbreaking. Okay,
it was terrible. Yeah.
Okay, but it was still a fairly weak case for 2.5 years of preparation.
Agree.
So I think it's very hard. Okay, especially when she wasn't the main. She wasn't the person always having sex with them. I'm not saying she didn't participate. I'm saying she wasn't the main protagonist for events 20, 25 years later. And, one of the things when I was trying to defend her, and I know people got angry, as a defendant, any defendant, and it was just her because that's who we were talking about, it's kind of unfair to bring charges so late because a lot of the evidence and people are gone, or things that you could maybe, and it's not a thing I love to see. Okay?
I mean, but speaking
as a defendant,
right? But speaking of evidence, and let's just for like 2 minutes, let's just both remain impartial. Just let's talk about the FBI. The FBI theoretically had confiscated and tapes and all kinds of things from Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion. So while they could not produce, I've tried to explain this to people, they could not produce what they confiscated from the Palm Beach raid, which happened in 2005, which was a year after the charges applied to Ghislaine. They could have introduced, because everything was filmed. Everything was filmed in New Mexico. Everything was filmed in Ghislaine's London home. Everything was filmed. So the FBI has this information. It's not like it's disappeared. They have some of it, and frankly, Leslie Wexner has let's just call them master copies. But why do you think that alone, if they had just presented, here's the tapes, this is what the victims are claiming, and this is on tape, why go through this whole, what I call a mock jury, a mock trial, mock court thing for Ghislaine? Why not spare all of us this whole thing?
And I can also explain that from my own experience.
Okay.
Okay. when I was arrested for threatening to kill the man that raped me, he was not identified. The Southern District of New York, okay, goes out of their way to protect rich people. And it's because the actual U.S. attorney and the main people that work there want to go to work for rich people. And I mean, like, you know, that's what they do. Do I think it's right? No. But Leslie Wexner's attorney was Mary Jo White, and she happened to be the U.S. attorney when I was arrested.
Mhm.
Okay. She made sure that those tapes weren't released. Okay. And once you've worked in that office, okay, like in my case, Arthur Lyman and Jay Johnson, who later became Homeland Secretary, were the lawyers for the person who attacked me. Okay.
Remind people who Lyman is. He's connected
Arthur
to.
Lyman was the head of Paul Weiss, was one of the lead litigators at Paul Weiss. He was also the Iran-Contra prosecutor. He was also the person who did the review of Attica. He was considered one of the greatest lawyers of his generation.
Correct.
He was a graduate of Yale Law School, and I think they have a scholarship there now for him. But he was an icon of the legal profession in New York. Jay Johnson was his associate on my case, and he was Secretary of the Army or Navy, and then became Homeland Security.
Right.
Cabinet.
And you nailed what most people don't get. You nailed the fact that we live in there are two worlds. There's a world where the very rich live, the privileged few, right? There's a funnel, and we're not part of that funnel. And then there's the rest of us. And so that the very wealthy do get protected, especially in a city like New York, right? They do. I agree, because I've had similar experience where there's no help for me, but there is a lot of help for, Rickless. And you went through a similar thing where there was no help for you, and there was help for. So you're saying that there was no way.
It was the prosecutor that wasn't happening. And I know you like to say it's a spy and a not spy, but wasn't the issue. Okay.
Well, that was not on trial, but I'm never, that was not on trial, but.
But I'm saying it was not a conspiracy. The Southern District of New York does its best to protect rich people. I'll give you another example in my case. When it came to sentencing, they refused to let me to bring a rape trauma expert. Okay, because that would have meant that I was raped.
Got it.
You know.
Okay. Let me ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can just bounce around. It doesn't have to be, in any order.
With Eva Duben. Okay.
Yeah, Eva Duben.
Okay, now I had friends from Penn who went to the Dalton School where Jeffrey taught, and they had Jeffrey as a teacher. One had him as a tutor. Okay, hired him extra to be a tutor. Now, the girl, my friend Lynn, said to me that even at 16, she knew to stay away from Jeffrey.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I'm bringing that up for a reason. When he was with Eva, he was much younger, and male virility declines with age.
Mm-hmm.
What was happening then? And no one's discussed it.
What? Be specific, because I just lost you. What was happening when, and no one's discussed
well, when
it?
she dated Jeffrey for 8 or 9 years.
Oh, you mean Eva? Well, she said on the stand that they were boyfriend and girlfriend on and off for 8 or 9 years.
Right.
And but she stayed in his life, right?
But I'm asking what happened during those 8 or 9 years. Was she recruiting girls for him? What was she doing?
Well, I mean, that Virginia Giuffre has alleged that Glenn and Eva Duben were her tester couple. And so that while she gave a non-sensual massage to Eva when she was pregnant, while she went to the, when she went to give Ghislaine Duben a massage, the situation became just like Epstein. And from that point on, she alleges that she was trafficked to all of these other very high-powered men.
Right, but I'm saying what happened before that.
With Eva
it's
and
hard for me to
Epstein.
believe that this 3 times a day with young girls started with Ghislaine.
Oh, so you're saying that you believe that it may have started with Eva.
Right.
That's interesting, because I've also heard from two people about Eva and a situation similar to that prior to Ghislaine's involvement.
Yeah, I think there's more there, that once again, they had her on the stand and the defense didn't ask her any questions.
Not only did they not ask her any questions, Jane specifically said, there was this group situation and Eva was involved. And frankly, it's the only Eva, and Eva has been, according to other victims, involved in this group situation. And Eva just says, certainly not. And then, they ask her, well, do you have memory issues? She's like, I have trouble remembering what happened last week. And I'm thinking to myself, are you serious? I could not believe. So for me, it was like 4 people perjured themselves on the stand, and they were allowed to. And that to me was like, we don't really have.
So my question is, if she has memory issues, Eva, how is she still on staff at Albert Einstein? Is it at Einstein, or is that what hospital is she at? Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai, yeah.
Okay, a doctor can't have memory issues. Everything that they need to know, they learned in the past.
So are we in agreement that Eva Duben was not forthright on the stand?
I'm not going to say, I think she could have memory issues. Okay, karma can be a bitch.
But if you have, listen, I might have memory issues. Maybe I don't remember what happened last week specifically, detail by detail, but if I was taking part in group activities with a bunch of kids, I would never forget it.
Not to those people. I think that you are applying your, and don't get mad, your middle class life to the way these people live. I think that's the problem most people with this case.
So you're saying that group activities like that are forgotten by Eva Duben.
A wealthy friend, 3rd generation wealthy, and he was telling his kids that in the 90s things were wild. And I know, a lot went on. Like I was, people always say, well, how could you didn't know anything? I was attacked in Palm Beach in very much similar manners.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the Palm Beach police in very similar manners, and they tried to arrest me rather than help me. Okay, they detained me, and my lawyer had to get me out.
Except you're talking about,
but I'm
something that happened.
Wait. They wouldn't remember. I know that.
Well,
that's
because
heartless,
no.
It's not heartless.
It's not even. It's not even about heart or anything. This
heartless,
was. It's yeah, but what this has been described as was a trafficking and blackmail ring.
It was normal then. It was normal then.
To have a traffic, everybody had a trafficking.
I'm not saying young girls. I'm not saying young girls were certainly not normal. Okay, but I am telling you, Palm Beach. See, there was no South Beach in the 90s. Okay, all the rich people were playing in Palm Beach, and the things that went on were crazy. I am not defending it, okay? And please, I'm saying, it was normal then.
But Eva Duben,
it was before AIDS, or a little bit before AIDS.
Yeah, and that would be like in normal life. I remember the 90s too. I remember the parties of the 90s also. But Eva Duben was not born to, let's say, Robert Maxwell. She's not a woman who was born into wealth. And so she was a normal person, and I would think as a normal person back in the 90s, dating Jeffrey Epstein, who was not yet the Jeffrey Epstein
Right.
that the world now is familiar with, she would have, in my opinion, remembered that she participated in group situations with minors.
Okay, so if you're asking me, it looks to me like she fudged her testimony. I don't know if she, I don't know enough. I didn't follow her enough at that time. Okay, but it looks to me like that all the pilots, Juan, the assistants, all didn't, and Eva did not.
Yeah, Espinosa said all same thing. I saw nothing. I heard no. I'm like, really? I was like, I couldn't believe
but
it.
Right. Okay, but Maria Farmer worked there and sent her sister to New Mexico. I'm not faulting Maria Farmer. What I'm saying is, I think people did not believe what was going on. I think that they did not understand the depth of his depravity. I know that's, I'm just saying, you can disagree with me.
But Maria didn't participate
I didn't say she did.
In group activities, but as Eva has been alleged to have by right. So,
but it was the 90s in Palm Beach, where I was actually a resident of Palm Beach at that time.
Right.
Okay. And I did not participate in these things. Okay, but
you did not. Okay, bravo, good for you.
No, okay. I meant that not even. I mean, just in general. But it was wild.
I do remember you saying something on someone's podcast, because you just kind of like it clicked that you were taken to a party, one of Epstein's parties, right, and you looked around. Can you walk us through that? Because that was an interesting.
I went to I was at Chuck and Harold's, which is now a different bar on Royal Poinciana Way. But someone there said, I'm going to Epstein's. Do you want to come with me? Okay. So I said, yeah, why don't I see what's happening? Everyone in Palm Beach at that time knew about his parties. Okay.
Well, when you say that, what do you mean? What did they know about his party specifically?
Everyone kept talking, like I used to hang out at the Breakers Pool at that time. It's part of the Breakers Hotel, which is like a really nice hotel in Palm Beach. And people would say, oh, there's these wild parties at Jeffrey Epstein's house. So I went with my friend there, and I had been there other times, but I hadn't actually been for one of these crazy things.
Right.
Okay. So I went, and his house is on a cul-de-sac. It's at the end of the cul-de-sac, and I say that because more can go on there than say a lot of the houses in Palm Beach, which are not as secluded.
Right.
Okay. So I went in the house and I walked around, and and I was young, and I know it's hard to
no, you were very pretty. I've seen pictures of you, and you're still very good looking. All you have to do is just do what I got myself a treadmill, because over COVID, 5 pounds. I'm like, no, this is 5 will turn into, who knows what. No, I've seen pictures of you. I have nothing to say about very pretty.
Anyways, so I was maybe closer to 30 at that time, okay? And I went to this party, and people did look younger. They did not look under 18. But I don't know if I would have known the difference between 18 and 16 at the time. Right. And I didn't think about it. You don't actually think, and maybe this is going to, you don't actually think a nice Jewish boy, quote unquote,
right,
is going to have, 15-year-olds at his party. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was not in my thinking at that time.
Did you see anything odd, or because I
saw the girls were much, much younger than me.
Okay.
But I thought that was 18, 19. Okay. Right. And nobody was looking at me. They were looking at all these young girls, and they were dressed, very provocatively. And I said, oh, well, I guess this isn't for me.
Do you remember what year that was, Laura?
91, maybe 90.
So just around the time that he bought the house. That's kind of about the right time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he
So
started right off the bat having parties, because that's
he definitely did. And that's why I said, I don't know why
Yeah,
nobody's asked if Eva was involved,
right.
But separate.
Well, yeah, let's pause, because that's a very good point. Ghislaine did not really start her day-to-day with Epstein until really the last week of December of 1991, and then commencing 1992. So there was Eva before that, and I think that's a very important distinction to make. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay.
Also, I want to, when people, and I think a lot of people said it, that she was supposed to marry Epstein. Okay, originally, when her father came to America, and bought, what was it, the Daily News?
The Daily News, yeah.
Yeah, just, New York Daily News. The plan was for her to marry a Kennedy. So all these people who say her plan was to marry Epstein, that just wasn't true. I don't mean a Kennedy per se.
I don't believe that either. Right. No, she came to New York in 1989 with her father at the time that he purchased the Daily News. And she was seeing a couple of the Kennedys, but you're right. The plan was not to marry an Epstein.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people said that her father wanted her to marry Epstein. I was always told the plan was for her to marry an American prince. Okay. I don't know who that, I guess, I'm just saying the Kennedys because I don't know any other American princes. Right. But I'm not saying there aren't others. You know what I'm saying?
There are plenty American princes who would have fit that description. But you're saying something that I think is very important, because Ari Ben-Menashe, Stephen Hoffenberg have gone on every show that they are invited to, and what they say is that Robert Maxwell introduced Ghislaine Maxwell, or they somehow in the mid 1980s, and they were an item, and that it was Robert Maxwell who, quote, brought him into the family, and that they had been together from the mid 1980s. And that's not true, because she had another boyfriend and he was with Eva Anderson. And so I find that whole thing, and then that the money from Robert Maxwell was somehow transferred, the missing pension money from 1991, come on, was somehow magically transferred to Epstein. I don't buy the story. I don't believe Ari Ben-Menashe. I think that there's an ulterior motive there. I don't believe Stephen Hoffenberg. So why do you think they're perpetuating this story? Because I don't believe it either.
Okay, one of the reasons that, people criticize me, but one of the reasons I spoke out from the very beginning, and a lot of my colleagues in the Jewish press did not agree with me, I felt that so much of this was anti-Semitic. And let me explain why. I said on, I can't remember his name, the YouTube guy, you know him. Anyways, I said several times to him
Sean Atwood.
Sean.
Yeah.
What's his last name?
Atwood.
Right, Sean Atwood. I said she's being protected by MI6 or, former MI6.
Right.
Everyone at that time, and that was in January, way before she was caught. Mm-hmm. Okay. And everyone was saying she was being protected by the Mossad. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I object to that. Okay. Mm-hmm. You don't have to agree. I am saying that Robert Maxwell only came to Israel late in life. And I've talked to many people that were founding, people of Israel. And Robert Maxwell was a spy for himself. He helped many people, many countries. Okay. This does not mean he didn't help Israel. And one of the ways he helped Israel fell into his lap when Moshe Vanunu, which was had Israeli nuclear secrets, came to the Sun, which was owned by him. Right. Now, one of the things that bothered me is that everyone kept blaming Israel for this. Now, I am not saying that Israel did not benefit from Robert Maxwell's, information. every time I was in a room with Isabel, people would stand up when she came into the room. But I know
You're
for
saying
many of those
only in
things-
Israel that happened. People stood
Right.
up when she came into the room.
No, but I
That's-
never was in a room with her in England.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, so I never was in a room in France. I'm not in a room where there were, long-standing members of the Israeli aristocracy. So it would be
Right.
British aristocracy.
Right.
So I'm just saying, so I really believe that, and I was right that she was being protected by British guards. And I kept
Mhm.
telling people that, and I told the FBI that you're looking for the wrong guards if you're looking for Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, Isabel would never have let her be protected by Israelis, because Isabel really cares about Israel. And she would never have drugged Israel into this. And she was, even during this time, was doing a lot of work for Israeli high techs. So I'm just saying, in my, part of the reason I spoke up was to say, no. She, now, did Ghislaine maybe, sell information after that? Maybe. But, I want to say she sold it to everyone. Okay. Epstein is a little too erratic to be a spy for anyone. And I say, I'm not saying that he didn't have tapes that could be useful, but he was a little crazy.
Well, but that, what you've just described describes spies, CIA spies, or any of them, because they do work for
everyone tried to
themselves.
blame it on Israel, which is one of the reasons I said, no, this is not just an Israeli operation.
No,
Don't
it's
blame
not. It's
Israel.
not just, I believe it's
Well, I see a lot of times on your timeline, it's all Israel. Israel is not.
No. It's not. Well, I just want to say that Jeffrey Epstein, prior to, when studying Ghislaine Maxwell's actions, she was toe to toe with Epstein. Okay. So just to give you an example, so when he was caught in 2005, whether it happened the way that we have been told, because you and I, before we close our show, we're going to talk about mainstream media and the distortions. But we were told that one of the mothers called the police. Other people have a theory that it could have been Trump who was upset.
I think it was Trump.
I believe it was. So can you expand on that from your perspective?
Okay. In my perspective, Donald Trump, okay, and I saw it. As a broker, I was a stockbroker at that time. I had several clients that were members of Mar-a-Lago, and they were like member number 4, number 8, not those particular numbers,
right,
but,
right.
Original members of the Mar-a-Lago club. Okay. And at that, so I was there, to have a business lunch with my client, and, or dinner or whatever. But there was a big competition between Epstein and Trump at that time. And
what year would that be? Do you remember?
Say it again. I didn't hear you.
The year approximate?
Oh. That was, okay. Well, I was a broker, and I'll try to figure out the year. I started to be a broker in 1981, but I probably wasn't big enough to go to Palm Beach by then. Definitely in the late 89s, 90s, 91s, around then. Because, when you start out as a broker, you're just,
right.
You have to build up your business to where you're an essential part of people's lives, in that they give you more and more of their portfolio.
Right.
Not you're an essential part of their personal lives. Just to, so, they were always competing for women and, other things. And, Donald Trump was the kind of guy that would turn somebody in. There's no question about it. Could it? I mean, I don't know if that woman also called. It could have been a case where that woman called also. But I know from my experience, I went to the Palm Beach police in like 95, 96. when I wanted to get, file my complaint of being attacked. Instead, they let me go. Then they came and rescued me at my house where I was staying. And they came with a squad of cars. So they may have gotten the complaint from the mother of the victim. And then only when Donald Trump came in did they act on it. So, both could be right.
It could have been do you believe the story that has been almost now set in stone, that they broke their friendship over a real estate deal, that, Epstein wanted a certain property that in fact belonged to Leslie Wexner at one time.
Right.
And that Donald Trump outbid him, even though he's always been struggling. I'm a New Yorker, I kind of know a lot about Donald Trump because of Rickless. And so I know he had money issues, so that suddenly he buys his property and that caused their breakup. Or do you think it was something a little deeper than that?
I think it was a woman. I think the property didn't help, but then a woman got involved somehow.
I mean, do you know a specific woman? I mean, it's certainly not Ghislaine.
No. I actually think it might, they've talked about Middlefort now. I don't know if it's her, but, they shared a lot of women.
Right.
No, and it wasn't true. Melania.
No.
Either. But I don't know. I think there was a couple things. There was a couple things that happened, but but a deal for that real estate deal was a big one. So maybe we're wrong, and it's just that deal. That was Trump made a ton of money on that deal.
He did. He sold it right.
And he made a ton of money at a time when he needed a ton of money.
Yeah, that's true. Now, some people are confused. Some people say, oh, Donald Trump was introduced to by Ghislaine Maxwell. And I'm like, no. Trump knew Epstein separately, and he knew Maxwell because he had, he had known her father, and that's how he had met. And so, do you know the story, or we'll pass over this if you don't know this?
I know that they had a party on a boat when Robert Maxwell brought the Lady Ghislaine to New York, maybe 89?
Twice, 87 and 89.
Okay, so and for sure in 89, and it could have been 87 also, but for sure in 89, Donald Trump was on that boat.
He was actually on it.
What? Been on the boat.
He was also in 87.
Okay, but I know for sure in 89.
Yeah, so I know that he was friends with Robert Maxwell, but people are trying to figure out if he already knew Epstein. And Epstein, I think they both, here's what I discovered, and correct me if I'm wrong. They had some friends in common, okay,
let me explain something. In the 90s in Palm Beach, it was a sleepy little town. If you hung out a couple times at Club Colette or O-Bar, O-Bar it was owned by some guys from the Hamptons, but it's where Ted Kennedy or Ted Kennedy's nephew was accused of rape.
Right.
They all met each other. All, quote unquote, the assholes hung out together. So it was a very sleepy town back then. So it would have been impossible for two New Yorkers who liked women and real estate not to eventually bump into each other.
See, I think they met in New York, and I think they met through Nikki Haskell. Remember Nikki Haskell?
Yeah.
Well, Epstein dated Nikki Haskell, who was completely, 14 years older than him when he was kind of trying to meet wealthy people. Do you remember Nikki Haskell? Yeah, she used to go to
whatever happened, Palm Beach solidified their relationship.
Got it.
I mean,
okay.
You might be, they could have met a million ways. New York's also in some ways a small town.
Yeah.
when you're doing certain things.
Yeah, agree.
Okay. But I am saying that in Palm Beach, they definitely solidified their relationship. So you think Nikki Haskell introduced them? Okay.
I do, because she was a fixture at Studio 54. She went, she was Ivana Trump's very close friend for a very long time. Jeffrey Epstein was living sort of like not far from Nikki's place in the 60s on the East Side. And when I was doing my research, I discovered, oh, okay, she used to have parties at her place. And then, and she used to like to party, and she always went to Studio 54, which, by the way, has the Roy Cohn connection, which has the Donald Trump connection. That's why Trump would go to Studio 54. And so I believe that it was through Nikki Haskell that Jeffrey Epstein met Donald Trump. And of course, when you're in that circle, like you said, it's a small circle, and you're going to meet each other, and like the boys will be boys.
Now, I don't know that enough. I know who you're talking about, but I don't know Nikki well enough to know that part of the story.
Right.
But I do know that before Ghislaine was there, Epstein knew Trump.
Exactly. That's yeah. Right. It wasn't like
no, but I mean, you could be totally right. Yeah. I'm just saying that. I didn't always back then. Those things were not. People don't. People always. I say to people, look, in the 90s, you weren't like wondering. You didn't know that Trump was going to be president. You didn't know that Epstein was going to. All this. Which
brings me to my other question for you. Just we're right now we're just giving our opinion. Did Epstein come on Trump's radar because he was sort of running for president in the 2016 election, and sort of like he needed to get him out of the way somehow? Or do you think it really was the work of Julie K. Brown, who sort of stumbled upon this story in 2018 because the person who Donald Trump chose for the position that eventually was given to Alexander Acosta, he had to drop out, for various reasons. And then it was given to Acosta, and suddenly Julie was looking for a story. So do you think that it was actually Julie Brown who brought that to the forefront, or do you think that Trump decided to keep looking in the rearview mirror and make sure that, there's Jeffrey, and I got to make sure, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so I think a couple things happened. I don't think the Southern District of New York, as the joke goes, is always known as the sovereign district, which means it does its own thing. I think that that person wanted to make a name, who was Jeffrey Berman at the time, wanted to make a name for himself. There were, you're always looking for one factor. Sometimes it's 20 factors that all work together. So Julie's story came, and Jeffrey Berman, who was the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District when the case started, wanted to show he was independent of Trump. He maybe didn't like all of Trump's politics, like big surprise. So that was that. Also, I think, we have to give some credit to Me Too, etc. Things changed. But I think without Jeffrey Berman, this case wouldn't have happened. I don't think many other U.S. attorneys would have brought it. A 25-year-old case, et cetera, et cetera.
It was odd that it kind of came up from out of nowhere after all of these years, even though the victims had been pushing for years.
Yes. And they also, I want to say, look, I pushed the wrong way. Okay. I pushed by making hang up phone calls. Okay. Which was wrong. These girls have done a tremendous job of keeping pressure on the case and on their assailants without going outside the law for the most part. And I give them, it's a very emotional thing.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to keep that pressure up. They deserve a lot. Now you're also, what's it, David Boies? You know, he also had a part. He was constantly, he has an excellent relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York. He was also looking for a payday. You know, you're looking at the criminal case, but Boies and is it Sigrid Macaulay?
Yes.
They're looking for a payday. So I think you people are underestimating that a guy like Boies wants to avenge his reputation for defending Weinstein. He wants a payday, and he sees this as a way to get it.
Well, you see, so I agree with you. I agree with you.
But Julie Brown still gave, you still need a news hook. Unfortunately, look, one of the reasons I think Ghislaine was arrested was there was an HBO special that featured her a lot and blamed her a lot. Prosecutors, they're supposed to be law and order, but they're not. They are very, very subject to what the media is writing about.
Well, that's interesting for people to hear. Say it again.
No, I believe that many of these cases wouldn't have happened without the media. Julie Brown's story, put pressure on people to act.
And I think also
the HBO documentary, which mentioned Ghislaine many, many times. I can't remember the name of it. Ran in May of last year. Put pressure on people to arrest Ghislaine. I believe without those two,
there's a third element. There's the fact that suddenly the victims were on Twitter and we were all tweeting away, right, and we were keeping the story. You don't think so?
It was that HBO special.
You think it was the HBO special?
Yeah, I know it was from what other people said. That's when the pressure got, we all like to think Twitter is important, but really less than 20% of Americans have a Twitter account, and most don't use every day. So it's kind of an echo chamber, including me and you and everybody else. You know what I'm saying? So I'm on it. So it's not, but HBO, is international, and lots of people have it. It's a whole different thing.
So, so we've looked at
I'm
this.
not saying that
no.
Your campaign and everybody, I'm not saying that all didn't affect, but we give too much weight to what's on Twitter. A perfect example.
Because they contacted me to participate. All of these documentaries have all reached out to me, and so they're very plugged into Twitter. And what we're saying, all of us, they're watching us right now.
Yeah, I understand. And that's true. So it's a great place to find subject material,
right?
From articulate people, but prosecutors don't act because of something on Twitter.
Oh no, agree. I mean, the fact that there were, it was in the news. Then there were these documentaries. That brought a lot of attention to the case. This is true. But listen, this lack of transparency is very unusual and I don't know a lot about the court system. But if you seem to be a little bit more knowledgeable. So what I do know is that with a federal case, it's not televised, but this was still a federal case, and we were able to listen in from the time she was arrested, and she appeared in court for the first time, at least in New York, on July the 14th, when she was arrested. And we all listened in, and suddenly Judge Nathan decided, well, we're not going to allow that to happen. And then there were all these redactions. I think you've kept an eye on what's going on with the trial, right?
Okay.
And then there were all these redactions and, all the secrecy. And so that the way that I want to finish this, because then I want to move around to mainstream, so that the way the average person who are not like you and me, who are really focusing on the case, the way they're going to hear about this is through mainstream media. And as we both know, they're not necessarily always telling what happened. So why do you think that Judge Nathan didn't just say, okay, we can just listen in?
I think she was nominated for the appeals court.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to mess up that nomination. Okay.
So it played a role.
Yeah, but I also want to say the Supreme Court now allows audio of their hearings. So how can a case with this much public interest not at least allow audio?
Agree. I mean, it was left.
So you're always looking for this case, and I'm saying we need to start working on getting transparency for all cases, because the next time a case like this comes along, that it happens.
But this is the case we're talking about. No, I understand that you're a crusader for all of that, but this is the case I'm focusing on, and really
I understand.
7 days a week for 2.5 years is a lot of work and a lot of time. But and people just are stunned at the lack of transparency and
how about all the redaction of the flight? These people went on a flight with him on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Okay, why shouldn't they be listed? I don't really see. Now you've got to assume it's Bill Gates, etc. And Bill Gates is known to be cheap. Okay, so it doesn't surprise me that he hopped a plane down there with them.
Right.
What bothers me is, why shouldn't we know who these people are?
I agree. I mean, we all agree. I think that there's just an outcry, because the way we look at it is like, people who follow me and my friends, and this is the sort of the case of our lifetime. This is like the first big thing after Me Too with Harvey Weinstein, and it involves.
Harvey may be getting out of jail from New York.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's and Cosby got out of jail.
Right.
And that said, what do you think will happen with Ghislaine?
Well, I thought, okay, I talked to a very well-known litigator in Pennsylvania who hasn't been obviously in the courtroom, because we can't be, but he said sometimes less is more. And he thinks the defense may have found one juror that is going to go for juror nullification. That may be why it was so condensed. Okay, I believe that it was condensed because jurors are in a good mood at Christmas, and Ghislaine's team, attorney team is looking for a Christmas miracle. But yesterday in court, as I mentioned earlier, they came up with this thing where even if she knowingly avoided knowing what was happening, that she still is guilty. If the jury follows that, and juries don't always follow things, they may say, then I can't see how she can't be convicted. I mean, in that case, yes. But then the question goes, okay, if you notice, I kept calling her a victim of Jeffries, and people got mad about that. But the prosecutors have now come out and said she can't argue for mitigation as a victim of Jeffries because she's denied it from the beginning. And they've asked the judge to stipulate that.
The other thing that happened, there were a few things that happened. I think it was yesterday. All the days kind of like gel into one for me at this point. But a couple of things were odd to me, and so I'm going to ask you, because you know a little bit more about the court system. Right. So as the trial just ended, her team was getting the word minor removed. And now then they substituted it to under 18. And then after that, they changed that to under 17 so that the word minor is no longer used. The other change that was made was to, and this is to be included in the instructions for the jury. The other change that was made was to not refer to Ghislaine as the defendant, but to refer to her as Ms. Maxwell. Is that typical that the wording can be changed to be when they're just about to give the jury instructions? I thought that was unusual.
Okay, this is the thing about her lawyers. They are expensive. What are they, $7 million in running?
Yep.
I don't know what she got for that. I mean, honestly, I don't know what she got for that, except for these crazy little things. So jury instructions are a big deal, and lawyers can fight about them. The Ghislaine is to humanize her, okay? And the under 17, because I actually think that's the more important one, because a lot of these girls were over 17.
Well, there were two but there were two that were 14. One was 16, right. One was 17.
But two weren't. No. Look, clearly this was going on all kinds of levels, okay?
Yeah.
These were not the only 14-year-olds involved, okay? But I'm saying...
But in the trial, yeah.
But in the trial, many of the witnesses were over the age of consent in their states.
What happened? Yeah, so that you're saying
so that the age of 17 is very important, because as soon as so they're going to go back to the jury room and they're going to say, well, this witness was over 17. We should just discount what she said.
Well, I see. Yeah, they did. I see the reason, but I'm curious to know if this is standard operating procedure for just before, because I thought that if she is being charged, and the charges are specifically for transporting of a minor, blah, 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 and it's they're two of those charges include a minor, and that right. Suddenly the word minor is removed and it's replaced with under 17. Is that even an allowed thing, or is it because of what you just said that these attorneys are so expensive and they get their way?
Well, I think something we have to ask ourselves, in your conspiracy theories, I don't agree with them, but my conspiracy theory is, why were 20-year-old prosecutors, 20, 30, very young prosecutors, the only ones on the case? Where was the senior person? We never saw in court, at least nobody discussed it, except one day, a senior person in the courtroom. So my thing was that they thought this was a dog of a case and they were going to hang the young kids on it. And that is terrible.
So what you're saying, and correct me if I just misheard, right. You're saying that no one thought that the 4 victims who are now in their 40s, so this happened to them when they were, young teenagers, that no one thought that they were going to be sufficiently believed, and so they didn't bother to really do the work, and they shortened the whole thing from a 4-week thing to a 2-week, so that they botched it intentionally because they were like, so it's going to go for Ghislaine. They thought the prosecution. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you were serious about, as you're right, you're interested in this case in Ghislaine, but I'm interested in ending all sex trafficking or all,
Well,
whatever.
Me too. I'm interested in that too.
Okay, but I want to see, if you had arrested the pilots, do you think any other person seeing transporting a young child would ever do it again? A pilot? They would stop immediately. Nobody wants to spend 20 years in jail. Okay, think about people, you see, Ghislaine is a singular figure. Okay, there aren't going to be many sex traffickers like her. But if you had arrested everybody along the way, Okay, this sex trafficking would have been stopped dead.
Well, I agree with you that they should have arrested the pilots first and started from
But you would have
there.
gotten so much information. What if the pilots told you Leslie Wexner was always on that plane, or this was happening on that plane, or whatever.
Yes, I
it was,
mean,
they were
we
gonna
we
tell
ended
you.
up really getting no new information from this trial, which
Right.
is why I
But don't you
call it a
think that's
mock
odd?
trial. Huh?
Don't you think that's odd?
I think it's very odd. There was no information. So basically, what I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to say it for the third time, is that the prosecution botched the case because they really were not vested into this.
Right. Right. Now, and that may be because the man that who brought the case, Jeffrey Berman, is gone. And he was gone because he brought this case. So you think Trump wanted the case brought, but he was fired partially for bringing this case.
So let me tell you something about Trump if you want to know.
Yeah, go ahead. I do want to know. Of course I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you would want to know. Okay. So Michael Wolff, in his I think it's his latest book, said that Donald Trump was definitely going to give Ghislaine Maxwell a preemptive pardon, but that he was talked out of it because had he given her a preemptive pardon, she would have then had to face separate that the states would have gone after her, so that he was actually in her corner, but he decided he would be doing her more harm because the states would then have had their individual cases against her. So I thought that was interesting.
I know. Look, I know that she tried for a pardon. I said that on Twitter at that point.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I knew that.
What do you mean she tried for a pardon? You mean she reached out through her friend Ivana?
There's ways. You don't necessarily Ghislaine from calls and talks to him. She has somebody who talks to somebody who talks to somebody. You know what I mean?
Because I think she's still very friendly with Ivana, and Ivana still talks to Donald because they have children together and grandchildren.
Yeah, but there were other ways, lots of ways that she got to him. But I actually was told that Jared put the kibosh on it, and Jared was kind of in charge of all the criminal justice.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
that's possible.
Right. I'm not. I'm not.
Michael Cohen, by the way, I don't think says who talked Donald Trump out of pardoning her, but that someone close to him that he does trust, it could be Jared, told him, don't do it because they'll go after her on the state level. It could be Jared.
I don't know if Jared would have been that sophisticated. So I would say.
So then maybe it was someone else. Yeah.
But I'm saying. I think, for the record, he likes giving pardons to his friends.
He's done. Yeah, look, I know who he gave pardons to, and I know his business relationships with those people, and I found it shocking. But they all do it. So after a while.
No, but I mean, Steve Bannon could have faced. See, I'm not sure that argument's the right one, because Steve Bannon also could have faced state charges, and he still gave him the pardon because he needed Steve Bannon to run January 6th, etc.
Let's get back for not too long, but Scott Borgerson is her husband. If I were in her position and I married some guy, I don't care if he's younger than me, my age, or older, and the dude does not show up for me from day one, and he's not in court, and he starts dating somebody else while I'm in jail. Come on. I would be so
but
upset.
You're looking at marriage as a
I know, but I'm talking to you as a woman to woman. Why do you think?
No, she doesn't look at marriage that way.
So that you're saying that it's okay that Scott was missing in action?
No, I think it's disgusting, but she had terrible taste in men. She did not look for men.
But let's forget about her what she needed. Scott Borgerson is an American-born guy, and he has American-born values, and he doesn't have the French values that Ghislaine has. And so, granted.
Why do you need a guy? Listen, she's always tried for the impossible. Okay.
No, but why do you think he just was really missing in action and he didn't even testify if he were
Because I
not
don't think
given?
he loved her from the beginning. He was using her because she helped him with his business and introduced him to people. They had, dinner with Clinton, etc. He was intoxicated with that. And I think, if she really did marry him, I think it was done to protect her assets. It was
That's a good
not
point.
done for love.
So you're saying that she didn't love him and he didn't love her, and this is another.
I don't know if she can love. You're thinking that, these people.
I agree with that statement. That's why when people were saying, "Oh, Ghislaine Maxwell is in love with Jeffrey Epstein," I don't buy that because I don't think she can love. I think
No. But if Jeffrey wanted to marry her tomorrow, if he was still alive, she would marry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. She would still marry him.
No, Jeffrey's the one. And now that, what I mean? Like, but after that, look, she was dating Ted Waite, who is a nice guy and, just as rich, maybe not as flashy. And she still couldn't get away from Jeffrey, but it was her choice. She kept working for him. What normal person would find a new guy, okay, and stop working for the guy who made her find 3 girls a day to satisfy his sexual needs and still still have ties to him? That's not normal. Because she always loved him.
A lot of this is not normal. How do you think mainstream media is going to, because look, I'm going to let you have your statement, and I'm going to back you on this about mainstream media. But in my opinion, mainstream media has not necessarily always said what really happened, and it's because they're all part again of this world. They protect their own, right? So that, for example, the Daily Beast is owned by someone who sat on the board, Ghislaine Maxwells, and so that there's just this small circle of men who really sit at the top of mainstream media, and they're going to dictate what's going to be said. I foresee that they're already spinning this case and eventually into oblivion, sort of like, it just, at some point, nobody will remember Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, and that may happen sooner.
No.
So what is your take of how mainstream media, do you think they'll slant this story, or do you think they'll report accurately what's happened in the court?
Well, okay, first thing is, why is Ghislaine called a socialite? I really never understood that. Okay, here's a woman who, by now we know, or at least witnesses have testified, went to high schools looking for girls. Okay, that seems a little odd. Okay, to keep calling her a socialite.
Yep.
Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, Clinton and all these other people have issued statements, but Hillary Clinton was just today, I was watching when you were DMing me, it was on Fareed Zakaria, and not one thing about this case came up. How is she allowed to promote a book and not discuss this case? Okay. So that's that thing. Then, as far as I'm concerned, I saw the media come after me in the craziest way. Okay. Ghislaine Maxwell is charged with perjury. We at least know that it's a good likelihood that she most likely lied through all the case. Okay. I never saw the girls. I never hired underage girls, blah, 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 blah. Everything almost that came out of her mouth in recent years is a lie. But yet, the one time that she's telling the truth is when she says she doesn't know me and that I wasn't speaking for her or whatever. I I couldn't believe it. You know what I mean?
Neither could I. Yeah, I thought, oh, that's so disingenuous of mainstream media to suddenly, because it benefits them, and
Right.
maybe because Ghislaine thought perhaps she just didn't. What something.
No, I'll tell you what
something
happened.
clicked.
I was presenting a theory of the case that was against what her lawyers were going to argue. And in fairness, I should have shut up then, and I, basically have till
You did,
recently,
yeah. Mhm.
because I felt that it's her lawyer's job to defend her now and to speak for her. And because as I've told you, this is about criminal justice for me, as well as sex trafficking, as well as these victims.
Yeah.
Okay. But I could not believe that everyone all of a sudden believed her when she's charged with perjury and hasn't told truth since the started. Okay, that's
do you happen to know, Laura, because I haven't been able to find it, when her case for those 2 perjury charges begins?
Well, when you talk about buried, I am betting that case is buried and doesn't happen.
That was my concern. It was like, I don't see it on the dockets. I don't see it scheduled. It's like it just was removed from the initial charges and
right. But that case won't happen. I would bet. Or she'll plead guilty in connection with this and have the sentences run
but she's not pleading any, she's not
well,
unless something happens, Monday, right?
Right. Let's see. No, I meant on the second case, not the
yeah.
Not on the first. So that's the first thing. Then everybody was angry at me, including you, for the Sun interviews. Okay, I gave them information. Their job was to go to Victoria Roberts, whatever, and get the Virginia. Sorry, Virginia Roberts, and get the second side of the story. I gave them, and I was the first person in November of 2019, and I told the FBI this, etc., that she had a boyfriend. Okay, and I was giving them clues to find her, and everyone said I wasn't disclosing where she is. So my first thing is that I gave them information. How they wrote it was not, I wasn't writing the story. They should have balanced the story, but so everybody was angry at me.
Well, the way I remember it, and correct me if I'm misremembering it, was that the way they were writing it was you're speaking on behalf of Ghislaine Maxwell, and then we got upset saying, well, then Ghislaine should not use a spokesperson. She should just come out and speak
but
herself.
I said that these were the things I knew. I did not say I was speaking,
that's what they wrote. The headline
I understand, but I don't control what they write, and I can try to correct it. I didn't say I was her spokesman. And I mean, but that even your defense defies credulity, because I was saying, she liked having sex. I don't think Ghislaine was having me out there talking about her liking sex.
No, I remember that you would say things that would sounded to me like, how could Ghislaine be asking her to say this? However, what happened ultimately with mainstream media, for people to understand, is mainstream media turned around, and it was again the Daily Beast and their friend, the Sun. It could have been the Sun, or even
no, it was the Daily Mail.
The Daily Mail and the Daily Beast together.
They just came after me, but
they said that you did, that you were. I don't know what word they decided, but they disparaged you terribly. And I was surprised, because I know that you are Isabel's friend, and that you are a friend of the Maxwells, and that they tried to claim that you were just some person who just wanted attention. And I was like, well, actually, that's not true. That's the only reason that I kind of remained very neutral with you, right? Because you're still, on the Maxwell side, but you do have the perspective. You say things that any normal person, frankly, would say. You look at this, I believe, much more objectively, let's say, than Ian Maxwell, who just seems to be on a planet of his own. And that's why I have always responded to you. I've been, I've maintained an open line with you. I don't want people to think that you and I are just talking today. I was like as shocked as you, and so I thank you for coming on. But is there anything you want to leave as we close this for the day? And again, thank you so much for just say on the spot. I'll do it, Kirby.
Well, like one of the people in the Daily Beast who attacked me was Chris Spargo. He was then fired from the Sun for complaining about me, but nowhere in the story is there any knowledge of that. Then was it Tara Palmieri, who now works at Politico Playbook? She said that I made a flippant remark to her that she wanted to know where Ghislaine was. And I said, the Daily Mail wants to pay me $20,000 for it, and I'm not telling them because that's not, I gave information to the FBI police. It was a New York police FBI task force on child trafficking, and she said, and the thing is, she was calling me in the Maldives after midnight. Nobody puts that in there. Okay. So she said that. Then Piers Morgan's raked me over the coals on his show.
I saw that show. I thought, wow, okay.
Well, I didn't want to attack him because it's his show, and I should have. And it was 3 a.m. when they had me do it.
Wow.
But Piers Morgan's staff begged me to have them meet with Ghislaine or Isabel, and they were going to pay Isabel $10,000. And if they met with Ghislaine, they promised not to divulge her location. But yet, when I didn't want to divulge it, I was the devil incarnate. So here you have Britain's most watched morning show, and the staffers there of Piers are saying Piers will go meet her, and he will not divulge her location. But yet, whatever I did was wrong. Okay. Well, first of all, I work for networks. I book all kinds of guests. I worked on the town halls for Biden and Trump. And the Biden town hall that I worked on had 13 million viewers. So I can't do it. And it's not any secret that I'm a journalist.
So let me ask you about that before we close, because that's interesting. How did you go from becoming from being in the sort of like in the Wall Street arena to then transitioning to becoming more of like a media where you have access? You had access to the White House, I believe, at one time. Do you still have access to the? So how did you make that transition?
I've known Biden since '88. Okay, so I was living in Israel. I know part of your conspiracy theory, but it wasn't. But at that time, 2 things happened that I knew Bernie Madoff, who was also another Palm Beach fraudster. So the conspiracy could be that they used to say Monaco is a sunny place where shady people go. I disagree. Palm Beach is a sunny place where shady people go. So I knew Bernie Madoff. I had met with him, but knew there was something wrong. I did not know, once again, that it was this big a fraud.
And then you started to go become a reporter because of the Madoff connection?
Partially, I was on TV a little bit because of that. But when I lived in Israel, the story that people tell is not the story that I know. And it's also why I kind of stepped into the Ghislaine Maxwell thing. I feel sometimes people have this vision of Israel, and you included, that I just don't think is accurate. And I live there. And I'm more liberal than 90% of the world. Okay. And I know no, Israel isn't perfect. And no, I was not a fan of Netanyahu. But I firmly think that Israel tries to do many right things. No, it's not. It's a bad situation. Okay.
So, but how did you get the credentials to go into the White House? Okay, so
How did I get? Okay, so first of all, I did know Trump as
right.
and I'm very involved in criminal justice reform. Right now, I passed in Pennsylvania a law called the Clean Slate Law, which allows people to, and I brought the coalition together, which included Eagles football players like Malcolm Jenkins, who's now with the Saints, all the way to the Koch brothers. I brought people like the Koch brothers in, who I do not align with politically to create to work on this bill.
So somehow,
Okay.
because you had these connections, you were then given a press pass to go inside the White House?
Yes.
Okay.
And then people in Philly. And look, one of the problems with Philly, and people ask why I was in New York so much and knew Ghislaine and whatever is. Philly was a wonderful place for me to do business, okay? Because I was one of the more brighter stockbrokers in town. But it's a very provincial city, and eccentric single women do not do well here. They're much more accepted in New York. And if you haven't been born here and lived here, 3 generations, you're not really a Philadelphia.
Got it. Got it.
So
Do you,
my brothers didn't want me to come back to Philly when I came back from Israel.
oh, that's interesting.
And maybe I shouldn't have, but I like the walkability. And you mentioned, I saw you mention New Orleans, and New Orleans, now that so many people from natives have left, might be a place where everyone I met was a transplant.
It's a lovely place. It's one of
Yeah.
my favorite places to go to.
Yeah.
I love the music and everything. Well, listen, Laura, I want to thank you again for
Okay, I don't know
taking
if
the time.
Are you going to play the whole thing, or are you going to edit?
Oh,
How are you
no,
gonna...
I'm gonna just, I don't have the editing skills, so I'm just gonna,
Okay.
once.
I hope that I dispelled some of the, that people think I'm this horrible person, and I am
I
not.
don't think people think that, and I think they're going to listen to this conversation, and I believe that they're going to see that you're impartial and you have your opinions, and you clearly said that the prosecution blew it, which I look at it and I see they blew it. And I think in closing, we should remind people that it's the prosecution's responsibility to prove the case. It is not the defense's responsibility. And so I just quoting one of your tweets, and I have it somehow in front of me here, because I went back and I took I hadn't really, I don't have time to look at everybody's tweets, but because you were like, yeah, I'll come on the show, I decided, let me just see what you've been tweeting. But I think I wrote down, or at least I remember that you said that the prosecution does not really have to do much, and they didn't. Right? That they decided that, they didn't have to work it. Well, one last question so Sarah Kellen, who is, as you know, was one of the 4 co-conspirators.
Why isn't she charged?
Well, not only that, but they had her listed as one of the, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but they had her listed as one of the 35 or so people who were going to be called as witnesses on Ghislaine Maxwell's behalf, so for the defense. However, Sarah Kellen was going to plead the 5th, and they were still waiting for her to show up on Friday. And I'm thinking to myself, why on earth are they waiting for Sarah Kellen, who's only going to get on the stand, plead the 5th? What's the bit? Why would it? I mean, just my last question. I'm sorry I have so many for you.
No.
Why would they even have her get on the stand and plead the 5th? That didn't make no sense to me.
I think they hoped that once she was there, that she would answer a couple questions. Pleading the 5th, she might have pleaded the 5th to some of the questions, but not all the questions. Okay. And I think also it was important I think it was a mistake they didn't wait for her. I believe that when they see how many people were involved in this ring of sex trafficking, that they would ask, why is Ghislaine the only one charged? And demand answers.
And that's a good point.
I think, look, first of all, I want to make sure everybody, so I have tremendous respect for all the victims. They have handled themselves tremendously well, and my heart hurts for them, because I personally went through the same thing and I had a nervous breakdown. So I know their pain personally. But I also, people got mad at me when I said this. There were things, the other reason I got involved was I know Ehud Barak, and I know Alan Dershowitz. And do I believe they're not the greatest guys in the world? Yes. But unless they didn't, Barak is not as sophisticated as Alan Dershowitz, but it was hard for me to believe what Virginia was saying, because I know he's Israel's most decorated hero. And I know him as a man of integrity. He happens to live next door to my cousins.
That's interesting. But however, we can't take away the fact that Ehud Barak would stay at one of the
Yes.
properties given
No,
to
but he's cheap.
Epstein
He's cheap. He's
by
an Israeli.
Wexner.
Israelis are cheap.
And
Listen,
the
I don't think he's an angel. I don't think he's an angel. But when he divorced his wife, he married an older woman. Okay. So
yeah, but
I am just saying, when people asked me why I got involved, I said, I know Ehud Barak. I spent time with him in Israel. I know him as a man of integrity. I also know Alan Dershowitz. And, something I meant to say, I asked Alan Dershowitz to work on my case, and he wouldn't. And I had enough money. But the issue is, I wonder, has Alan Dershowitz ever defended a woman?
That's a good point. I don't think he likes women in that way. I think, he will defend a man no matter what.
Right. No, I'm just saying. Anyway, so
but I want to add something, because we're being very frank here, which I like. So I was trafficked. And when I was trafficked,
I knew.
Well, let me make my point.
Yes.
The clients were wealthy guys, primarily, all of them married, all of them pillars of society. So that when I look at someone like Ehud Barak, to me, it's like, okay, it's possible. When I look at somebody like Alan Dershowitz, oh yeah, it's possible. Because that was the client, they fit the mold. They're all married. They all on the surface have a perfect life, a perfect wife, beautiful, maybe even younger, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're incapable of having a secret life. I was part of that secret life. And so for me, it's like, they're looked upon as these guys that, would never do such a thing. Like Virginia, I was in a situation where I saw that they do have secret lives that, who are not part of that world would never, you wouldn't see it, because you are not part of that world. So you give them the benefit of the doubt.
Here's my answer. The people who you're considering pillars of society, even look at Leon Black. Ehud Barak is in a whole different category. This is a man who risked his life for his country. Can you imagine Rickless, Leon Black ever doing something like that? That takes a certain amount of character that those men don't have. You can disagree with me, and it's okay. But you're asking me, why I step forward, because I know how many Israeli soldiers are killed every year. I know how many are maimed. And I know this man is Israel's most decorated soldier. And that takes a character that many other things don't.
Okay, we can agree to disagree on that, if that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
well, listen, so are you still in New Orleans, or did you go back to Philadelphia?
I'm home.
You're home. Well, listen, Laura, stay on, because I'm just going to say goodbye to the audience. So again, this is Kirby Sommers with Laura Goldman, who I thank profusely for coming on the show, the Epstein Project show. Please remember to like the video, like and subscribe, and listen to it twice, because Laura has made some remarkable comments, and they're worthy of study for a very long time. And again, Laura, thank you for being on the show.
And I'm glad we gone past our, whatever, our difficulties.
Agree. Okay, thank you. All right, everybody. Until next time, it's Kirby Sommers for the Epstein Project podcast. Thank you.